Hey guys and girls, Board now back with you, and on this video I return to the stand. So this is going to be my review of the first season and episode 2. It is called Survivor, and the Pocket Survivor refers to the name of the band, who the character of Larry is in the past anyway, and he kind of takes up the main focus of the episode. So I think what we're doing, at least in the early episodes of this series, is that it's basically showing the background of the four chosen characters, if you like, the chosen ones who have been selected by the Prophet, played by Whoopi Goldberg, to sort of lead this new town and to develop it and, sort of rebuild it and kind of put a defense against the virus type thing. So Larry, from what I can assume, the Redmond character, the James Marsden character from the first episode, is one of the chosen ones. And we see him early in this episode welcoming Larry to the town and to the setup. And I think Larry's meant to be the next, chosen one. So what this episode does is it kind of cuts back and forth between the past. So we get a lot of Larry's past, and we also see some stuff with him in the present as he arrives to the town and is meeting people and settling in. And there's also this character of Nick, who I guess is the other main sort of focus of the episode. And he, as we discover in the last scene, is potentially heading down a different sort of path. But we kind of get flashbacks about their respective fortunes, if you like. I'll talk about Nick in a moment, but so full spoilers for the episode, and I guess just talking about it generally, I would say I have the same feelings I had at the end of the first episode, and that is that it's very solid. I think there is a lot of encouraging things about it, a lot of promise moving forward. I would say it still has the same couple of problems as the first episode. I think, first of all, I think it tries a little bit too hard to be kind of edgy and kind of, kind of gross out, or just very in your face with its kind of, credentials, I guess, in that sense. I think at times it sort of wears out on its sleeve a bit too much. I think it definitely could have cut some of that down, or maybe on occasions been a bit more subtle about it. And I think at times, again, and certainly with this episode, there's still moments that feel over the top, maybe bordering on a little bit soapy. And I think in this episode, at certain times, although there's not that many moments of CGI, but I thought there is a standout moment of CGI quite near the end of the episode, where I think the CGI was found a bit wanting, and it might just be this thing where they're overstretching themselves because they're trying to really put it out there as this kind of in your face sort of pulpy type show, this kind of very sort of unsettling, sort of gross type sort of flavour to it at times. I think that's where maybe they've caught themselves out with, and I'm talking about, I mean, those full spoilers anyway, but for those of you who've seen the episode, I'm talking about the the army of rats, if you like, which come out of Larry's mother's mouth in the sewer. I'll explain that in a moment, but uh, I'm exaggerating when I say army, but certainly a few rats come out of her mouth, and the visual effect wasn't really that great on that one, I had to say. But same as in the first one, plenty of good things, good cast. And again, I think with this one, with some of the stuff with Larry in the past, I think it definitely explores the concept and the idea behind this sort of virus and the effect it has on humanity and the town. So I think it is getting quite deep into the science fiction mythology and playing with ideas and stuff. So there are promising signs, along with a couple of not so great things, which hopefully, or it'll sort of lose as the season moves on. So the story of Larry in the past, well, first of all, we meet him in the present, where he's essentially been hiding out in a store along with a group of other people. Now, one of them is this character played by Amber Heard. I forget her name actually. I think it was Nadine. I guess kind of weird seeing Amber Heard in something, considering the stuff with her in the press and stuff. But anyway, she's there. I sort of heard she was going to be a part of the series, and quite a big character, I think. And there's also like the character of Joe, this young kid who I think his mother must have died, because he appears to be without a parent. So both Larry and the Amber Heard character has kind of been looking after him, and they've been kind of watching out, and Larry has been kind of helping both of them. And it's at the start where they basically get picked up and get moved to the town and what have you, and we see them later on setting up digs, and the Amber Heard character agrees to look after Joe, at least for the time being, and she's kind of getting settling in, but there is like one kind of spooky moment with her where she hears a noise in her house, and something from behind the bookcase, it appears, but we only get a little bit from her. As I said, a lot of it is Larry in the past, so we see that he's a musician, he's in a band or a singer, whichever one it was, and he's down on his luck, basically. He's sort of into drugs, and the drugs have overcome him, and he's basically fallen out with his band. He's hit on hard times, and I think because of the virus and stuff, that has got hold of his mother, who's very ill and is basically dying. And that's kind of what the visual is in the sewer later, because she's not, I don't think, actually meant to be there. It's just the past kind of catching up with Larry. But we sort of see him early on. He's got this gig in like this club, and it's kind of just showing you how sort of downbeat his life is at that point, how sort of hopeless, and which I think is meant to then contrast with him being more proactive and positive later on, when we see him in the present, where he's sort of being a leader and really looking out for these other two characters. But yeah, in the past, when we first see him, he's not in a good way, and he has to like potentially play a gig solo, and there's this whole fight with one of the band members who he also has the virus, and there's just this whole thing over like their music and stuff, and like one particular song And it gets to this stage later where Larry decides to take his mum's in hospital, and Larry decides to take her home with him because the virus has escalated in her and she's basically gonna die. And Larry sort of decides, well, if she's gonna die, she might as well die with me. I'll take her home because again, this very dystopian type future, we see that the hospital is overrun and they're almost like, we don't know exactly where your mum is, that sort of thing. So things are so sort of grim that it's almost like he thinks the best thing for her is to take her home and hopefully she can be comfortable. And it's as he's taking her home and, you know, taking her inside that the other guy shows up and is just being a real dick and aggressive. And Larry kind of says, well, if you give me a minute, I'll come out. And the other guy basically has lost it. He's got a gun and sort of is pointing it at Larry. And I think it's just this whole thing that's building up this sense of, you know, this bleak sort of predicament for society and the world. Again, I think just I like the actor playing Larry, and I think the character's okay. You know, he's got promise, but I think just some of this stuff, particularly in the past, in this first half of the episode at least, I think is a little bit cliched, a little bit soapy. I think they're sort of laying it on a bit too thick. But obviously, yeah, it's setting up other stuff, and we soon get this sense that Larry's demons are kind of chasing him. And I think the most interesting part of the episode is this extended sort of section where, again, still in the past, he's now on his own. He's isolated in New York City. Well, it's a big city. I'm not sure if it's New York or I got the impression it might have been. It certainly looked a lot like New York, but and he meets these couple of characters, and one in particular, and it sort of shows you how kind of big this cast is because I had no idea Heather Graham was in this. I'm assuming maybe this is it. It's just this one episode, but she plays this character Rita, and it's one of those funny things because I was actually talking about her the other day, and I haven't seen her for a while in anything. So okay, nice little surprise to see Heather Graham show up. But in any case, she'd been doing the Foxy Bingos adverts. That's the last time I've seen Heather Graham. But she's this character, Rita, who kind of is drawn to Larry, and they sort of, you know, start hanging out and they spend the day together. Before he, like, meets Rita, he meets this other guy who's basically mostly naked. He's got like a gown, but he's kind of hanging out basically. And he's in the middle of the park, and Larry thinks that he's escaped from the mental like place, but no, he's just this regular guy. And he kind of says, well, you know what, I'm gonna go to, I think he says Yankee Stadium or one of the, I think, baseball stadiums, and I'm gonna go out and just let it hang out. I'm gonna run on the pitch naked, basically. And of course, it's that sense of, because no one else is around and it's deserted, you can do, you know, stuff like that which you couldn't previously do. So again, it's quite a basic example, but it's almost like this absurded sort of idea which you could see potentially some people doing if this sort of thing came to pass, because no consequences. And yeah, I think it's just getting into a bit of the idea that sometimes if there are no rules sort of thing, we do kind of go for it, and of course no one is getting hurt, but at the same time, in a way that's kind of not the point. It's still quite a demeaning thing to be doing, quite childish, of course. But so there's that guy, and then Larry meets Rita, and as I said, you get a similar sort of vibe from her, that she kind of doesn't care and is very free and uninhibited. And so at one point she kind of just has a gun and she shoots at like a bird sort of box or house or whatever it is on the river. And again, it's similar idea, because there's no consequences. I'll just sort of do it. And she's like walking around with the gun, and they just spend the day together and get very intimate. So again, exploring this sort of idea, because although it's that sort of relationship where you might not exactly frown on it, but it might be okay. It's quite shallow because, they've just met and stuff, and they kind of think they have this bond, but, it's maybe just sexual in a way. But because of the circumstance, because they're like two of the only people, of a few people around that area, and basically the rest of the area, is isolated and no one around and stuff. I think it's that thing of, yeah, it becomes more special, it becomes more intimate because both of them are isolated. And I think that's what I really like about this section, is you get that sense because it captures like the sort of deserted city very well, and there's some very good direction in this particular section with them wondering about the city. I think there's a couple of musical choices that are a bit weird in this episode. There's a scene where they use like a Weezer song. And I've not talked about the scene yet, but it's during like a robbery in like a store type shootout type scene. And then they use, which everyone's gonna know even if you don't know the band, but Sigur Rós, that one song of theirs that kind of everyone sort of knows when you hear it. But they use that when there's like an intimate moment between Rita and Larry, and I sort of thought that was a bit of a weird choice, I have to say, but I do like this stuff, and I like their relationship and what it's exploring. And what basically happens is they sort of see themselves as like sort of together now. I think the idea is that it's maybe more than just a day, but in any case, this street gang starts like picking on them and attacking them because like one of the gang, at first it's just the one guy, he asks he offers Larry money to let him sleep with Rita, basically. And it's a lot of money. You sort of wonder a bit how this guy would have this money. Maybe it's just without anyone around, he's just managed to like steal it. I guess maybe that's the idea. And it's sort of funny that he would give all that money up, just to sleep with a random girl who he doesn't know. But whatever the case, I guess again it's digging into like the ideas of this. And yeah, he basically offers Larry the money, and Larry, isn't going to go for that. He's better than that, so he can't. There's no way. And then a gang of them just come, and they've got guns, and it becomes this sort of chase around the street. And in the end, Rita and Larry, they go down into the sewers to hide, and basically they're heading towards the town. the main town, which we're sort of is the focus. And so they obviously decide we're gonna have to do it by sewer now, but you get all these rats coming basically. And again, this section is really tense, really well shot. Um, and Rita kind of gets freaked out and scared and doesn't want to go through the rats basically. Um, and there's sort of an argument between them because Rita wants Larry to come out with her, go back to the surface. And Larry's like, well, no, I'm not going to die. And again, I thought about this after. It's sort of interesting because, on the one hand, you sort of think, Rita, you're crazy. I mean, why not just chance it and go through the sewer and the rats? I mean, otherwise, you're more than likely going to die at the hands of the thugs. But on the other hand, I think it's maybe getting at that sort of thing that I think she has a very bleak outset. She basically thinks it is the end of days and it's kind of sooner rather than later she will die. She will probably get the virus and die anyway. So I think maybe she just, what the hell, I'll just chance it with the street folks. So Larry kind of sticks to his guns and obviously goes through the sewer, and that's when we get the whole section, which is very sort of dark and murky and tense, where he basically sees his mother floating about and it, appears to see a creature in the sewer, but not sure whether he does. And he basically starts freaking out because all these rats come at him and stuff. And he ends up, running up the ladder and freaking out because they're all coming at him. And when he gets up, he like collapses on the sidewalk, and Rita's there, and she's like talking to him, and they're basically there. She points out, look where we are, and they've got to the other side. Now, this sort of made me question, is Rita real? Because at first, when Larry first met her, and obviously you had the weird conversation with the half-naked guy, it appeared as though, or I just got the impression that she wasn't real, and she was just appearing to him sort of thing. But as things went on and more stuff was happening between them, I thought probably she is real. But again, I think the fact that she managed to survive, having gone back out onto the streets where the street gang were, and then she ends up in the spot where Larry comes out, maybe suggests that she's not real, then she's in his head. But I think it's definitely meant to play with that idea where you're meant to question it. But anyway, they sort of go and they stay in like a sort of kind of a camp where they're like waiting, and I think again it's quite a bleak negative sort of like end to what we see with Rita, because they have again an intimate moment, and Rita says, oh, I'll be there in a minute. So she stands on her own, and we don't actually see what happens to her, but I think we're meant to sort of feel that she's kind of either like kills herself, or then she just stays on her own and doesn't go back, because I think it was either drink or drugs, we see her start consuming something. And I think maybe again it's maybe that we're supposed to think that she might not be real sort of thing, but either that or she sees this as the end anyway, and she's probably just happy having spent this nice sort of day with Larry, and so sees that as the moment to kill herself. But it's a bit unclear, but I would imagine that's the last of the Heather Graham Rita character we've seen. Now, the other stuff with the Nick character, which the episode doesn't focus on so much, is that he's basically a crook, and we see him early on in that store scene, and this again is some of the stuff I'm not so keen on, because I think they just go a bit over the top with the negative, the kind of OTT pulpy action stuff and all the swearing. I mean, I'm not really the sort to be like a prude about this sort of thing, but it did feel kind of forced, and I think Nick gets himself arrested and he's in prison, but because like the virus has spread to such an extent, basically people are like dying around him in prison, and so things are sort of escalating, and it's all very grisly. And at one point, his cellmate dies, and a bit later on, it's suggested that he actually a bit of cannibalism, that he actually took a bite and was feeding off his cellmate, which again probably quite realistic. I think if people were put in that situation, certain people would do it. Now I could be wrong, but I think we see Nick at some point at the city, at the place. He's in the room with like the Whoopi Goldberg character where she first meets and talks to Larry. I think that's Nick, the same character. So he must have some sort of a turnaround, or maybe there's something else going on. But what basically happens is everyone's dead around him in the prison, and he's visited by this random guy, played by Alexandra Skarsgård, who I knew was in the series, but he seems to be playing the opposite of the Whoopi Goldberg character, where he's almost like a prophet of doom sort of thing, like a darker version of her. And he's trying to corrupt Nick and trying to convince him that he can be his right hand man, basically, and that he only has to agree to that. And he'll let him out of his cell. And he's basically saying things like, well, the world deserves to pay, basically, all these negative people. And he just puts evil thoughts in Nick's head. And obviously, Nick's already quite a negative sort of guy, but he obviously wants to get out, so he kind of agrees to it. And I think this is a good part for Alexandra Skarsgård. He really fits it quite well. So he lets him out of the cell and they sort of walk off, and that's the end of the episode. So I'm assuming we'll get more from Nick either in the next episode or certainly in the future, and more from this Skarsgård character. And I could be wrong, but that's how I read it. And he was like the darker side, the other side of what the Goldberg character is. So that's potentially setting up some interesting stuff. We very briefly see like the other characters from last week. We see Franny and also Harold briefly. We see that Harold is now living in a house on his own. And I think that sort of makes sense with the stuff we saw with the Redmond character now in the present, being with Franny, and she's pregnant with his kid. I think that's right. I'm still trying to work out all the time stuff, but anyway, Harold it appears as being isolated from Franny, or obviously he was interested in her romantically, and so that obviously didn't work out. So he's on her, and we briefly see him talking to Larry, um, because he's kind of been told to show him the ropes and what have you, and Larry sort of makes a comment, says, "Oh, sorry, sometimes that happens along the way on a journey. We do, we're close with someone, but then things kind of change." And we see Franny briefly as well. She's talking to the Amber Heard character and kind of just, giving her a few, supporting her, a few words of that sort of thing. So we don't see much from those characters in this episode. Hopefully more next week, but they have it. Solid stuff anyway for the most part. Again, with a couple of problems, but we'll see how it develops in the long term. That's my review of episode 2 of The Stand. And when it comes to new TV, one of the big shows of the year is, of course, WandaVision, the new series from the Marvel Universe, which is going to be on Disney Plus. Starting, the first episodes actually go up in a matter of hours, and I will be across that. I will be reviewing at least the early episodes to see what I think, and also probably doing a live stream maybe to one or two of them. So look out for my reviews of WandaVision, and if you like this sort of content, please like this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you want to help see more of it, and also share it around to your friends on social media to hopefully get me out to a bit more people. But thanks for listening, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.